Marc here again with the shepherd's pie. Yeah. What is up, everyone? Marc here again with another episode of Pandemic Pantry. Today we're taking on another request, and that is shepherd's pie. First, I just want to thank you guys all for watching the videos, for giving them thumbs up, for commenting, for subscribing, those of you who are doing those things. If you're not, do it. Give the video a thumbs up right now. You can subscribe by clicking the red button down below the video or the watermark in the corner. Shepherd's pie. It's a satisfying meal unto itself. I know normally I do kind of an entree with some sides thing. This is actually a satisfying meal in and of itself. The casserole sized thing that this is good for a family of 4. It should be plenty, or it would be 2 nights of dinner for a couple. So let's get started. All right, I think we have everything we need. So we are going to need about 1.5 pounds of ground beef. I have about 1 1/3 pounds here because that's how this is packaged. You can use ground beef, lean ground beef, or you can use, as I am here, a meatloaf mix, which is a combination of beef, veal, and pork. And I think just the same way that it lends itself well to meatloaf sometimes, it works really well with something like shepherd's pie like this. Adds an additional depth of flavor. So aside from that, we're also going to need some salt and pepper. We're going to need 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda. We're going to need about 1.5 pounds worth of russet potatoes. You do want to use russet potatoes. You don't want to use any of the red skin or yellow. They can be kind of waxy and they don't mash as well into as smooth a consistency that we're going to need to pipe onto the top of the shepherd's pie. We're going to need 4 tablespoons of butter. We're going to need 1/2 cup of milk and 1 egg yolk, just the yolk. We're going to need some oil. We'll need 1 onion, about 1 tablespoon of tomato paste, 2 cloves of garlic, a little bit of red wine, about 2 tablespoons, 2 tablespoons of all-purpose flour. Any flour you have, I think, should work. It's really just for thickener. About 1.25 cups of beef broth. We're going to need 2 teaspoons of Worcestershire sauce. We're going to need 2 sprigs of fresh thyme leaves. But in this case, I don't have fresh, so we're going to use dry. I'm going to use about 1 tablespoon of dried thyme leaves. We're going to need 1 bay leaf. We're going to need 2 carrots, peeled and chopped. We're going to need about 2 teaspoons of cornstarch. And that's really about it. So the first thing we need to do is get the beef into our, broken up into the bowl. We're going to mix it with a couple of tablespoons of water, salt and pepper it, and the 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda. And what the baking soda does is it lowers the pH of the meat, and that helps with browning. And so once we do that, we're going to let it sit for about 20 minutes, give or take, while we turn our attention to the potatoes. Okay, so add a couple teaspoons of water. We'll add our baking soda. Salt. And black pepper. And we're just going to toss this a little bit with my hands to combine. And you'll know when it's combined because you'll kind of see the pepper throughout. Okay, we can set this aside. we're on to the potatoes. So first thing I'm going to do is peel these, and I'm going to get a little bit of water a little closer to boiling. Because we're going to need that next. And we want to cut these into about 1-inch chunks. And we want to add these to a pot of water and get them boiling. We're essentially making mashed potatoes here. That up to high. While we're waiting for the potatoes to cook, we can take care of our onion. Okay, we'll set that aside. We can now get our carrot taken care of. And we can get our milk ready. We want about a half a cup. Alright, well, we're going to let these potatoes go for a few minutes because I'd like to finish cooking the potatoes before we move on to the beef. It'll be easier to get this situated, and you'll kind of see why in a minute. Okay, it looks like the potatoes are good, and I have a couple tablespoons of oil heating up for the onions. But first, we're going to drain the potatoes and get them mashed and set aside. Okay, now you want to toss these around a little bit on the hot burner just to evaporate some of the excess water on here. Now we're going to add the melted butter. I melted the 4 tablespoons of butter in the microwave, and we're going to add our milk and our 1 egg yolk. Now the thing about the milk is, depending on how how dry or how wet your potatoes are to begin with, you may not even need it. Oops, wrong burner. So first we're going to mash. You want to try and get a pretty good consistency with your mash, because this is going to get stuffed into a plastic bag and the corner cut off so they can pipe it onto the shepherd's pie. So we're going to add our butter. And I found that just mixing with the masher is as good as anything else. If anything, it helps continue mashing them to a better and better consistency as you go. We're going to add our egg yolk. And, I don't know, maybe about half the milk. Alright, I think we've got a pretty good consistency here. So we're going to throw the cover on this and set it aside. While we turn to the onion. And we just kind of want to get the onions cooked through until they're translucent and you're getting a little bit of color in there. Okay, we're just starting to get some color on the onions. So we are going to add the tomato paste and our garlic. And we're just going to stir this and cook it 30 seconds to a minute. Until it's kind of fragrant, starts to dry out a little bit, and the tomato paste kind of darkens. Okay, now we want a couple tablespoons of red wine, and really it's just a couple tablespoons. And we're just going to cook this a minute or so until it evaporates. And kind of scrape up some of the stuff on the bottom of the pan. Okay. Now we want to put in our flour. And we just kind of want to mix this to sort of toast it. You don't want to burn the flour, but you want to sort of cook out the floury taste, if that makes any sense. And this is also a good time to kind of scrub stuff off the bottom of the pan. Okay, now in is going to go the broth. Our couple teaspoons of Worcestershire sauce. Thyme, carrots, and we're going to want to add the bay leaf. I just want to get this mixed first. Okay, so we're going to bring this up to a simmer. And now we are going to add the beef in chunks. Now lower the heat down to a simmer. Cover this and let it go about 6 minutes. It's going to need to cook for a total of about 10 to 12 minutes, but we're going to want to break up that beef after it's been going for a little bit there. Okay, so it's been about 6 minutes, give or take. We're going to, I think I can turn the heat up to maybe 2.5. I'm going to break up the meat. Cover it and let it go for about another 6 or 7 minutes. In the meantime, we are going to get this potato shamooshed into a plastic Ziploc bag. It helps to fold the bag over a little bit like this, and then, you know, get as much in there at a time as you can, because every scoop is sort of difficult. Not really. I mean, you know, it's a little unwieldy. You know, the bag is kind of floppy, so that doesn't help. Okay. Now we just want to press any air out of the bottom. And get it to where it's really just all potato down there. And with as much air out of the bag as we can. And that is ready to go. We'll check on this in a few more minutes, and we should be ready to roll along. All right, we are in the home stretch. So I checked it a couple minutes ago, and it needed a little bit longer. So I let it go for an extra couple minutes. Now what I want to do is scoop out a little bit of the liquid. Maybe a quarter cup worth, a little more. And doing this is just going to help with thickening. And I need to take the bay leaf out, and I see it, so I'm going to grab it while I see it. So we just want to mix this, a little bit of cornstarch and the liquid from the pot into a sort of slurry, and just kind of make sure they're, I mean, it's okay. I feel like I got pieces of onion and carrot in here too. That's fine. You know, as long as there's no lumps of cornstarch, that's really what you're going for. And the whole point of this is that it's going to really thicken this up so that it'll stand up to being a casserole. Now, the recipe calls for this going into a skillet, and you put the whole thing under the broiler. I like to do it as a casserole because we'll freeze them, as I've said in the past. If you're doing it from frozen, you want to thaw it first in the refrigerator if you can, and start heating it in a 350 degree oven, but put it in the oven cold, and then heat the oven with the casserole in there. And you can do that from frozen too if you really need to, but reason you want to do that is so you don't shock the Pyrex glass and cause it to crack because of a quick temperature change. So if you throw a frozen or refrigerated Pyrex baking dish into a already hot oven, or especially put it under a broiler, not really a good thing. This is room temperature because we're we're just making this today. Okay, so in goes the cornstarch mixture. And I'm just going to mix that through. And I'll let that sit for a minute while I clean some stuff up. Okay, we're going to take this off the heat. Got a nice thick gravy in there. This will be really good filling. Alright, so now we're going to put this into our casserole. We'll cut the corner off of the Ziploc bag, and then we're going to pipe the mashed potatoes across the top. Okay, now, as I said, basically what we want to do is cut off the corner of the bag at about 45 degrees and make an opening about an inch. And then we're going to kind of use this like a pastry bag. I want to try and squeeze from the top and just sort of apply even pressure. Touch it to the glass a little bit when you're at the sides. That helps it kind of stick so it doesn't pull away on you. Don't squeeze the bag too hard or you'll tear out the corner, or you might blow out a seam somewhere else in the bag. If you hit a spot where, like a chunk of potato seems to be clogging, then, just slow down and in there with a knife or a fork or something, and just make sure you've got it kind of cleaned out. And this doesn't have to be perfect at this stage, because we're gonna smooth this out, and then we're gonna put grooves in it with a fork. And if you get too much in one spot and not enough in another, you can kind of pick a little bit of it up and move it around. Do what you got to do to get relatively even coverage. And coverage all the way to the edge of the glass. Or the edge of the metal if it's in a skillet or a frying pan. So just to go back to that for a minute, if you are doing this from frozen or preparing it ahead and cooking it later, as I said, have it go at 350 for, I don't know, as long as it takes to get from as frozen or refrigerated as it is to where it's kind of bubbling. And especially if you've got it in a glass casserole like this, you'll know, because you'll see it bubbling on the side. But then at that point, you'll want to switch to the broiler and try to get a little bit more browning on the potatoes if it needs it. Sometimes long enough in the oven at a normal temperature, you get pretty good browning. But I do like the way the broiler kind of puts some toastiness on the potatoes. You'll see why in a second here. So what we're going to do now is, you think this is done, but we're going to drag the fork tines across to create a sort of ridges pattern. And what this does is it helps with that browning, because it makes for little crinkly edges that turn brown and cook and dry a little bit in the oven. or under the broiler. All right, we're ready to put this under the broiler, and we'll come back in about 5 or 10 minutes, and we should be good, ready to serve. All right, we're looking pretty good, so I think we are ready to serve. There. How gorgeous is that? So we do need to let this cool for 10 minutes before we dig into it. Right now it is just lava. But again, just a note on those potatoes. The original recipe for this, before I modified it, called for 2.5 pounds of potatoes, which is an awful lot of potatoes. I can picture another pound of potatoes on top of this. You may want it that way, and that's fine. I like it with thinner potatoes just to kind of keep the carbs down. There's an awful lot of meat in here and vegetables and other stuff, so it didn't really need it. But again, up to you. Now, consequence of that, I think the 4 tablespoons of butter is perfect. The 1/2 cup of milk might be a bit much. Like I said, I usually end up using somewhere between 1/4 cup and 1/2 cup, depending on how damp or how wet the potatoes still are. And again, I try to dry them in the pan before before setting them aside to mash. But all right, we're going to leave this for a few minutes, and we'll come back and serve. All right, back again, and it is time to serve. Let's dig in. Just look at that. Potatoes, creamy and buttery. Try and get a little carrot in here too. Ooh, still very hot. That meat is perfectly cooked. And I really think the meatloaf mix with the beef, veal, and pork is the right call for this. I mean, it's just perfect. That's another meal. Guys, thank you so much for watching these videos. I really appreciate it. I hope you'll give it a thumbs up if you like the recipe, if you like the video. I hope you'll subscribe. Red button down below. Watermark in the corner somewhere. You can also follow me at Marc on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. But really, I appreciate it most when you leave your comments, when you give thumbs up, and when you subscribe, mostly. I mean, it really helps me grow the channel. But that's it for this one. We'll see you next time.